My parents stopped talking to me when I married, but now they want to, because I'm pregnant. I'm 28F and have always had trouble getting along with my parents, especially with my future. In my upscale neighborhood, I was often compared to my older sister Amber, 30F, who did well in everything she did, received straight A's in school, and became a successful lawyer in a New York firm. However, I was more free-spirited. I liked art and writing more than science and math, which my parents valued. Our family is wealthy. Dad, Richard, is 60 and wealthy, and Mom, Rose, is 58 and from a wealthy family. Her main volunteer activity is for many causes. Truthfully, I'm more interested in socializing than contributing. Their main purpose has always been to maintain our social status and ties. My parents planned my life from birth. I was supposed to attend an Ivy League institution, preferably Harvard like my dad, study business or law, marry someone from a wealthy, well-connected family, and run the family business with Amber. I didn't plan my life that way. I've always preferred the arts. I liked city museums, painting, and poetry. My parents believed they were cute hobbies but not career-worthy. They encouraged me to take tennis lessons and summer internships at my dad's company. Though I did everything they requested to keep the peace, I never felt like I fit into their world. My parents were angry that I didn't get into Harvard when I got into Brown, but they understood. They hoped meeting the proper individuals would send me on my route they always wanted. They had no idea it would take me to the guy who forever alter my life. I nearly ran into Chad, 29M, in the campus coffee shop in my second year. I was rushing to class and didn't look. However, he left with a tray of coffee for his study group. After the collision, steaming coffee splattered and soiled our clothes. Chad laughed and said, "Well, I guess this is one way to break the ice." We skipped class and spoke for hours. Chad was everything my parents didn't like, therefore I wanted him more. His destitute family was from a little Ohio town. His mother cooked and father worked in a factory. Chad was receiving a full Brown grant and working part-time to pay for it. He liked learning and wanted to impact kids' lives as a teacher. I knew Chad was special when we met. Though kind and amusing, he worked hard. He had a way of making me feel seen and understood. Chad allowed me to be myself, not the beautiful daughter my parents wanted, but the real me with all my flaws. First date of my life. I was thrilled. Chad inspired me to dream and imagine as my family never did. He didn't scoff or dismiss my desire to become a graphic artist like my parents. He helped me research colleges and internships. Naturally, my folks loathed him from the start. It happened during junior year parents' weekend. That meeting was delayed because I knew it wouldn't go well, but I couldn't wait. From the start, the gathering was chaotic. My family couldn't overlook Chad's past. They saw him as a poor kid attempting to advance by dating me. They mocked his cheap clothes, Midwest accent, and employment. My mom kept asking him if he wanted to be a teacher when there were so many other options. There are good jobs. Dad barely saw Chad. He was just talking to me and saying he didn't like it. They didn't care that Chad was kinder than the trust fund boys they sought to set me up with. They believed he wanted our money and position. As I defended Chad's intelligence and hard work, my dad remarked, "Oh honey, don't be naive, boys like that always have a case." Even though my parents didn't like it, Chad and I dated in college. We encouraged one another while studying late at night, celebrating our triumphs and planning our futures. Chad allowed me to be myself and follow my own path instead of my parents. Chad proposed after college. My parents expected a lavish party, but it wasn't. It was a great night to sit by the campfire and watch the sky while camping for the weekend, which my folks would never comprehend. "Will we wed?" Chad asked. "I know I can't give you the fancy life you grew up with, but I promise to love and support you in everything you do." I agreed without hesitation. Chaos ensued when I told my folks we returned from our trip. My mom cried and said I was wasting my life. My dad's? He became furious and stated I was making the worst decision of my life. His face went terrifying crimson. My stupidity and poor vision were criticized. Mom said, "Think about your future. How will you keep living the way you do now? What about your kids? You want the best for them, right?" I attempted to reassure him that Chad and I had discussed our future plans and were prepared for any issues. But they didn't listen. For them, marrying Chad meant living in poverty and misery. They offered an option when I refused to back out of the engagement. I either break up with Chad or they stop talking. No more grants, loans, trust monies, or inheritances. My dad said, "If you really want to live like a commoner, you can do it without our money." I was surprised. I expected them to be unhappy, but not this far. I learned then that their love and support were always conditional. As long as I did what they wanted and satisfied their narrow success criteria, I was their daughter. Once I took my own route, they were ready to expel me. I chose Chad. Our wedding was small and attended by close friends. It wasn't the extravagant social wedding my parents wanted, but its honesty and simplicity were ideal. Amber never arrived. She told our parents I did. My parents' lawyer sent me an official letter the day after my wedding. It told me I was out of their will and Amber was the sole heir to their money. I was also banned from the family home and warned that contacting my parents would be prosecuted. It ached worse than expected. My family prioritized their old ideas and social position over my happiness. Not the money. Chad and I were both working and doing well. The parents I thought loved me no matter what were gone. They rejected me because I wasn't ideal, and we didn't talk for 3 years. I sent letters and left voicemails on holidays and birthdays, but they never responded. Finally, I quit. Chad and I established a life then. He worked hard as a high school English teacher, while I worked hard as a small advertising firm graphic designer. We acquired a little house in a lovely neighborhood and got Max, a rescue dog. We weren't rich, so we had to budget wisely. We had love. I became pregnant 3 years after my wedding. Chad and I rejoiced. We didn't try, but we wanted babies and were excited for this new chapter. We waited to notify folks after the first trimester for safety. Amber texted me a week after we told our friends. She hadn't contacted me in 3 years. Quick and simple. Parents heard about the baby, want to chat. Call them, shocked. How did they learn? To my knowledge, I hadn't told anyone in my family. I called them after discussing it with Chad. Perhaps the prospect of becoming grandparents eased them. My mother answered my second call. Conversation was awkward. I heard my father breathing deeply and grunting in agreement as my mother talked most of the time. She congratulated me on my pregnancy and then, abruptly, said they wanted to make amends and be involved in their grandchild's life. Nobody apologized for how they treated me or acknowledged my pain. It was like the 3 years of stillness never happened. But then she suggested sending us baby gifts. She talked about a list before I could respond. She surprised me by saying they wanted a new car, a luxury stroller, a custom crib, premium baby outfits, and more. Instead of a peace offering, it felt like they were trying to buy their way back into my and my child's lives. My mother grew outraged when I respectfully declined, claiming Chad and I had already started baby preparations. "Don't be silly," she shouted. "We're just trying to help. Don't let your pride get in the way." After the call, my mom said they were sending the gifts anyway and were looking forward to being involved in their grandchild's life. She never asked how I was feeling, how my pregnancy was going, or how Chad was doing. It was all about the gifts and their expectations. When I told Chad about the call, he was furious. He thought my parents were trying to put us down and show that they could give our child things we couldn't. Despite knowing Chad was right, I still had a small hope that this was my parents' awkward attempt to get back together, and that if we gave them a chance, they would accept Chad and our life together. "Maybe they've changed," I said, even though I didn't believe it. "Maybe becoming grandparents has made them realize what's truly important." Chad looked at me and asked, "Do you really believe that? Or are you hoping it's true because you miss them?" Even though I missed family dinners, holiday festivities, and inside jokes, I couldn't forget the terrible times, relentless pressure, disapproval, and how they had pushed me aside when I was younger. Amber has been calling me nonstop, switching between telling me I'm holding a grudge and being excited about being an aunt. She doesn't seem to understand why I'm hesitating to accept our par. First, I want to thank everyone for their help and advice. After much thought with Chad, we decided to turn down my parents' offer of gifts. It wasn't easy, but we felt it was the right choice for our family. I called my mother and told her we appreciated the gesture, but we weren't comfortable accepting such expensive gifts. I tried to keep the conversation civil and suggested that if they want. "You're making a huge mistake," she said. "It will make you sad if your child grows up without the things we can do for them." I stood my ground though, and made it clear that Chad and I could take care of our child, and that all we needed from them was a link, not money. When we were done talking, my mom hung up the phone. Set limits. We kept everything in the garage until we knew what to do. I wasn't sure if I should send everything back when Chad wanted to. The situation got worse when Amber came over the next day. The gifts made her so happy that it seemed like nothing had ever gone wrong between us. "Isn't it great?" she gushed. "Mom and Dad are thrilled to have grandchildren. They want to help in any way they can." I lost it at that point. Love. I said, "Is that avoiding me for 3 years and then trying to get back into my life by buying it? Honey, that's not love. Now you have power." Amber stomped off angry and told me I was going to make a terrible mistake. "This time you're going to push them away for good," she warned. I tried to explain that after years of not talking to them, this felt less like a reconciliation and more like an attempt to buy their way back into our lives. But it's hard for people who haven't been through it to understand. Chad supported my choices and gave me a different perspective when I needed it. "We don't need their money," he reminds me. Amber keeps sending me pictures of baby clothes and nursery ideas while acting like nothing is wrong. My parents haven't called or texted me since the gifts arrived, but I know they're waiting for a response. Every day, new calls and messages from family members add to the pressure. As my pregnancy progresses, I know we must make a decision soon. I'm trying to focus on the good things about my pregnancy and our life together, but the family drama is always there. I just hope that whatever choice we make is the best one for our child. Final update: it's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things turned out for us. A lot has changed, and I've made some hard but necessary choices. My parents started showing up at our house without warning, knocking on the door for hours and saying they just wanted to talk. It was very stressful, especially as my pregnancy progressed and I was in physical pain. Amber kept sending me messages every day about how I was tearing the family apart.
My parents showed up at work when I was 32 weeks pregnant and caused a scene in the lobby. They wanted to see me and said they had a right to be involved in their grandchild's life. My co-workers were uncomfortable and my boss had to tell them to leave or he'd call the police. That made me realize that my parents hadn't changed. They still wanted to control my life and ignore my boundaries. The day after we sent the letter, I blocked my parents and Amber on all platforms. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also one of the freest. The constant stress and anxiety I'd been feeling started to go away almost immediately. Our daughter Susan was born 2 months ago. The birth was complicated, and I wished my mother had been there. Thanks to Chad, we got through it. People will judge and try to control her, but she is valuable because of who she is. She won't have the material things my parents could have given her, but she will have parents who love her no matter what and support her dreams. She'll learn to set limits, stand up for herself, and choose her own path in life. This journey has been hard, but I don't regret our decision.